What's the hardest part of building great software? Well, it isn't the design or the code, it's the people. You can have the best tools in the world, but if your team doesn't trust each other, you'll never ship anything worthwhile. And today we're unpacking why great relationships are the foundation of great software and what you can do when those foundations start to crack. So stick around and we'll talk about the human side of software that no tool can fix. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome. I am super stoked to have you. Have you picked up your paperback copy of Beyond UX Design, Master Your Craft Beyond Pixels and Prototypes? Unlock the secrets of UX success and learn all the things they didn't teach you in school. Get free shipping on all orders over $30 and use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your entire order. Just head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book to learn more. How often do you stare at a blank Figma canvas unsure where to start? Well, this episode is brought to you by Mobbin, the ultimate UI and UX design inspiration library. Mobbin gives you instant access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI and user flows from apps that you love, and content is added weekly, so you never have to start from scratch again. Quickly find exactly what you need. Search by app category, UI patterns, or even specific features. And my team and I use Mobbin daily at work to find useful patterns, and it helps my team work much more efficiently. And honestly, I can't imagine kicking off a new feature without Mobbin. So ready to level up your design process? Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro today and never run out of inspiration again. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Roddy, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, and Zoe for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. Get instant access to those videos right now for as little as $5 a month. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. So relationships, I talk about it all the time. And I think I might have found my spirit animal here with Guy Segal, who believes in relationships just as strongly as me. And, I say this all the time. You can't build great software without great relationships. But today we're going to break that down, and we're going to talk about how you do it and some key takeaways and actionable things that you can actually do to improve those relationships if you feel like they are not necessarily working. Guy Segal is a design leader with over 25 years of experience in the tech industry with a specialization in UX, product design, and design ops. Leveraging his passion for design leadership and people management, Guy has a proven track record for fostering innovation and collaboration within design teams, establishing and nurturing design practices, and leading teams to success. Guy's expertise extends to various domains, including product, UX, and service design, as well as a strong web and UI development background. And in recent years, Guy has focused extensively on design systems, establishing and growing teams around the practice, and launching systems that optimize efficiency and enhance user experiences. Guy, welcome to Beyond UX Design. I am so excited to have you on. How's it going, man?
I am so good, Jeremy, though. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So you and I had a chance to talk a couple weeks ago, and it's uncanny, our opinions on relationships and the importance of relationships for design teams and software teams in general. And I'm so excited to have you on today. You've been doing a lot of work in this area, working on this as a design leader for a long time. So tell us a little bit about you, and then ultimately, how'd you come to the conclusion that relationships are critical for success?
Yeah, so I actually started as a software developer way back in the previous millennium. And after doing it for a few years, I kind of stumbled upon design and UX. I had no idea that it existed. But once I realized that exists, I knew, okay, that's what I want to be doing. Because it was exactly what I was looking for without even knowing I was looking for it. I was super lucky to make the jump. Back then, there were no boot camps. It was before, we didn't have, thousands of people vying for the same position, luckily for me.
Back in the good old days.
I know. And I've been doing it since. And in the past 9 years, I've been in people management. I've been leading teams and design practices and building teams from the ground up. And every time you deal with another person who's not you, there's going to be friction. unless you're cloned and you have exactly the same thoughts and the same context and background, there's going to be disagreements. They're going to be, even if you're both want the same exact thing to happen, you're going to go about it in different ways.
Absolutely. I love that.
And where this is exactly why, working on those relationships is critical.
Yep, I love it. And, I believe very strongly in diversity and diversity of thought, diversity of background. Having a diverse team means that you're going to end up with better outcomes. But just like you said, that often times will end up manifesting in conflicts because you don't agree, you have different ideas, you have different opinions, different mental models. And so obviously, things are going to need to be hashed out. And, how do we do that in a productive way that actually gets us a better outcome instead of letting that diversity lead into just a total meltdown of everything and conflicts constantly. So I love that. And you mentioned something a couple of weeks ago, and I think this is like so smart, but I love that. I just want to like call this out. Like, I don't know, you probably should, you should definitely put this on a mug. Naming is hard. Talking about design systems and how naming's hard, but have you tried working with other people? I love that. And tell me a little bit more about this idea though. Like we talk about, I say this a lot, code is easy, software is hard because of the people, and engineers hate that. But I would love to sort of dig into that a little bit. Like, the work is hard, but the people are harder. Tell us about that.
One of the things you mentioned in your book, you said these are the things that they didn't teach you in design school. These are the things that they don't teach you anywhere, in any school. And these are the things that are going to make your life much easier if you know how to do them well. And that's how to remove those frictions, or at least lower those hurdles of interacting with other people. It's really easy for us to, when something isn't working with another person, with another team, or with another part of the organization, we try to resort to process. How many times have we said, okay, let's look at the RACI, the chart that says, what is the role of each person in this project, and make sure everyone stays in their lane so there's no hurt feelings and no one steps on anyone's toes. I'd love to hear from people that ever work from them in a long run. Because another thing I say, maybe that's a different mug or maybe a shirt, if you have to resort to a RACI chart, you already lost. Like something is fundamentally broken. And these are the things that I'm trying to teach people how to do a bit better.
Yeah, I love that. So, it's funny you mentioned this, like we try to fix people problems with tools or technical solutions. And the first thing I think about is, just like the way we track, I don't know, metrics for engineers or something, like what's your burn down rate and all these things, as if forcing people to hit some metric is going to produce better outcomes or something like that. And I often think about that. We want our engineers to work better. We want to be high performing. So instead of building better relationships, we just hold them accountable to certain metrics if that's going to improve. And how often does that ever work? I don't think I've ever been on a team where holding people to some metrics and reviewing some spreadsheet in the status, you didn't hit your metrics number, blah, blah, blah. It never improves things. I mean, it stresses people out and it makes it more difficult. And I'm just curious, like, have you ever run into that? Do you have any examples of that in the past? Because it's one thing to say it, but I wonder how many people don't even realize that they're doing it.
I think it all starts with the fact that, like you said, it's not something you can measure. How can you measure, or you can measure it in some ways, but it's not as, it's not a hard number, like number of lines of code written or how many screens you delivered. Trying to measure, like, is this person that's, people enjoy working with? You can do it, but it's a lot more subjective. And the big problem here is that at the end of the day, everything around communication skills falls under the name soft skills. Like soft skills from the world of, I think it's come from a military background, where hard skills is everything that you did that had to do with the actual machinery. The skills that to do with the hard stuff, and everything else, the soft skills as opposed to hard skills. But it's been misused in such a way that it becomes secondary, sometimes giving any attention at all. Like how many times have you seen, and I see it a lot, people who have a sort of a disagreement with each other, but they don't touch it because it's scary. They don't want to rock the boat too much, and it never goes away. It only gets worse and worse and worse. It festers. Any of those things are the things that I like to pounce on when I identify them, because if I don't catch them early on, they have a chance of just derailing a project. And these are things, for example, that let's say a project has a certain timeline and those timelines slip. people miss those timelines. Not because they didn't want to do their job, not because they didn't know how to do their job, because they didn't get alignment, or because they were spinning around and going in circles because no one was able to get to an agreement. Those are the things that, unfortunately, are not measured. So you can't say, oh, I'd love to reduce the friction, the human to human friction in my team and improve efficiency by 10% as a result. But unfortunately, no one looks at it that way.
Yeah, I love that. You know, what you made me think of right just then was, people are missing deadlines and things like that. And I can't remember the exact cognitive bias that this plays into, but there's a cognitive bias where the people that you aren't friends with, the people that you don't like, the people that you constantly are butting heads with, when they fail, you automatically assume it's because they're just bad at something. They're stupid. They're bad at their job. They don't know what they're doing. And then when it's people that you empathize with, I guess, for lack of a better word, you say, oh, well, they had trouble and there wasn't alignment, but look, how could they possibly have succeeded? And it's interesting because I think about this happening a lot where, UX designers, we were constantly butting heads with product managers. We're constantly butting heads with engineers, and so when they screw up, like, oh, those stupid product managers, they're always screwing up, the engineers, blah, blah, blah. But when it's other designers, like, yeah, well, how could that designer have it? So anyway, I just kind of think about that, like how humans were just so wired to think in such bizarre ways. And we're very rarely, I guess, logical in how we think. And I don't know if you've ever run into that or you have any other thoughts there, but that just kind of made me think of that. The thing that I think about most is with designers, we talk about empathy all the time, right? For users, but like, how often do we show empathy for our product managers or engineers,
Exactly.
and things like that. And it's so funny to me. I don't know if you have any thoughts to add on to that, but empathy for your team. It seems like so simple, but we just fail to do it completely.
One of the critical things that happens is that, we know exactly our own thoughts, right? We know what we think because we're the ones who have this brain. But I have no idea what someone else thinks. If I'm looking at let's say a product manager, and they're doing something, I can only see what they're doing. I can only hear what they're saying. I have no idea what's behind it. It's like what's in their brain caused them to. But the problem is that I tell a story about that. As humans, we are meaning-making machines. Everything we see, we assign some sort of a meaning to it. And if someone says something, we say, okay, what does that mean? And we usually try to see it through our eyes, which means if we were to say that thing, why would we have said it? So we ascribe the same meaning to that would have come from us. And that's the big problem here, because you're not empathizing in that sense. You're not trying to see something from someone else's eyes. You're trying to see, oh, if I said that thing, I would have meant it in anger, or I would have meant it in frustration. Therefore, they must mean it the same way.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like it's what I'm hearing here, and this is something I want to dig into a little bit. It's sort of one of those things where you can only control what you can control. And so, we could say all day long, like, oh, I'm going to assume positive intent in a way, or I'm going to have empathy and try to understand them and where they're coming from a little bit better. But often, a lot of times, the other people on the other side don't think that way, and they will jump to those conclusions or assume that people are doing their job poorly because they can't empathize with them. And I'm curious, when you're in a situation like that, what's some advice that you like to give people to say, like, here's how you might address the situation, or here's how you might help somebody else see that differently? Or how do you, as a leader, as a manager, how do you go about getting your team to think that way?
Yeah, that is one of so I try to teach a lot of these communication skills, and this is definitely part of that communication area. And my favorite that I like to do is all about feedback to a person on their behavior. This is something that, like you said before, we're not taught in school or any place. And people annoy us on a daily basis. Every day, there's someone who, I can't believe they said that. Or I can't believe they did that. Or why did they give me that look? Or they're late again. All those things annoy us and eat at us, mostly because we ascribe that meaning that I mentioned earlier. And that meaning is usually not very charitable. And it's usually negative towards ourselves, right? Oh, that person thinks I'm an idiot. That person doesn't respect me. And it's we're punishing ourselves. Something that someone else did, and we ascribe a certain meaning to. So what I like to do in this workshop is I teach a very simple framework for giving feedback to someone else, their behavior. And that's something I try to do. I try to practice it myself because, again, it's very easy to slip into those old habits of how you interact with other people. But I really try to resolve those conflicts in this way.
I love that. I would love to dig into that.
Yeah.
I'm going to back up because I probably should have asked this question first. But before you can go and affect change, essentially, like you have to identify that there's something there that needs changing. And I'm curious, what would be some signs, like as someone who's like an individual contributor, somebody, let's say like you're working with one of your direct reports and they're coming to you like these problems. What are the signs that they might be seeing that imply that the rest of the team is lacking that empathy and might need some feedback before we get in the feedback piece? Identifying the fact that some people might even need the feedback. What are some signs that people might look for on their
hmm
team to start this process? What are they going to see that's happening that's broken?
So there are some very, very strong signals. Like someone comes to you and says, I cannot work with that person. It's a clear sign that something in the communication is broken there. Then you have things that are a bit more subtle. If someone comes to me and says, oh, like we completely missed because of those other people. Like when I hear, like when I see fingers being pointed at other people, that tells me that there's probably, again, a misalignment or lack of communication between them. And I would love, that's when I try to dig a bit deeper into what happened there. Then you have a bit more subtle things, like someone that people don't want to work with. They don't necessarily say it out loud, but see that they don't go to that person or they don't include them. Those are a bit more subtle things. And again, once you have a team that you're more familiar with, it's easier to pick up on.
Yeah. It's interesting thinking about this too, because I was, as you're speaking, thinking about some of these subtle things. The first thing I thought of was, remote makes this really hard
hmm
because, like, especially if someone doesn't have their camera on or things like that, it makes it hard to gauge body language. It makes it really hard to really read the room. When let's say you're on
hmm
like a call with like 5 or 10 other people and everyone's just silent, cameras off. I mean, this happens to me all the time. I'm sure it's happened to you as well. You can't really read the faces. You have no idea how people are like taking this. Are they rolling their eyes? Are they like huffing or their arms folded? You have no idea. And so like that kind of stuff makes it really hard. And when I've been in those situations, the first thing I think of is like, what am I doing wrong? Why am I not able to improve? So I kind of jump to me and I blame myself almost, or, maybe you get a sense of imposter syndrome or something, whatever it
hmm
is. But you have a hard time gauging that it's not you and it is actually the team, the culture of the team, and in a way. I don't know if you have any thoughts there, but that's just like a really interesting thing I kind of thought of was like remote makes this really hard to dig into those signals.
It absolutely does. Totally agree with you. I think as a manager, one of the things that is really important for me is to establish that trust with my team and get to a point where they run into those issues, they come to me. And it does happen, which I'm very happy they do. And you're right, it's really hard when everyone has their camera off, but you also try to pick on changes in behavior. Let's say there's someone who used to be very vocal and participate and engaged. Then every time someone else talks, like a certain other person talks, they become quiet. I see there's something happening there, and then I try to go to talk to that person and say, is anything happening with the other person?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, and this is, I guess as you get further along in your career, you get a little older, a little wiser. I like to think that you blame yourself less and less. To me, that's something like I would do often as a junior designer, but or just junior or anything, whether you're a developer, engineer, whatever, PM doesn't matter. But as you get older and you realize, like, hey, I do know what I'm doing, and I actually am
hmm
better at this. But that little voice always kind of comes back in your head, like, what am I doing wrong? Do I not understand this problem as well as I thought? Do I not understand the system as well as I thought? Am I missing something that these other people know? Why am I not making any progress doing whatever? And so it's just really interesting, like that kind of, I don't know if you call it imposter syndrome or something else, just kind of creeps in. Self-doubt, perhaps, is a better way to say it. But anyway, I love your feedback there. All right, so let's talk about this. Giving the feedback. Let's say you've identified that
Yeah.
there's a problem. You have a framework that you like to run through. Can you run through that framework with us? And so everybody listening out there can take some notes and apply this next time they have this issue.
Yeah, for sure. And just to clarify, I did not make any of this up. This is a extremely common framework for giving behavior feedback, meaning feedback to another person on their behavior. The specific format I use comes from a really great book called The Effective Manager. It's a short book and it talks about a few areas that managers need to know how to do well. And one of those things is giving feedback. Super simple framework. And the important thing is that it's not just for correcting someone else's behavior. It's actually more important to do it when you want to encourage someone else's behavior. If someone is speaking up, if someone is being proactive, if someone is, you know what, there's a client presentation tomorrow and they come super prepared and they do a great job, you want them to know that because you want them to continue doing it, right? You want to encourage that behavior in the future. Same framework. So it has 4 parts, super simple. The first part, you ask for permission. Say, hey, Jeremy, can I give you some feedback? As simple as that. And if you say no, I say, okay, and that's it. Because I need you to be ready to receive. And if you're not ready to receive, what I'm going to say next is going to matter. So that's the first thing. You say no, I back away. You say yes, I continue. And then step 2 and 3 are the key ones. Step number 2, I describe your behavior. Let's say you were late every day of this week. You were late to work. And I want to correct that behavior. I don't want you to be late. Say, hey, Jeremy, can I give you some feedback? You say yes. And I say, when you were late to work every day of this week, I describe exactly what you did or said. I don't ascribe any meaning to it. I don't come to you and say, looks like you really don't like your job, do you? Because then you can say, what are you talking about? Of course I love my job. That's not the behavior. The behavior is something that we can't argue about. Like you were factually late to work. So you were late to work. And then step number 3 is what is the impact? And the impact can be something emotional, like, oh, you make me sad, or the team feels like you're not part of it, or people see it as an example and they feel like the work is not important. So that's step 3. And step 4 is if it's something I want to encourage, like you did a great job presenting, I'm going to say, keep it up. And if it's something I want you to change in the future, I'm going to say, I can tell you, hey, please don't be late. Or I can also engage you and say, what can we put in place to change that? How can we work together to make things better? So those very, very simple 4 steps. Nothing here is complicated. The important thing is to stick to the behavior and then talk about the impact. And ideally, if you understand that the impact is negative in this case, you would want to change the behavior because that's what I want to happen.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it is very simple. And I think this is fantastic. I'm curious, an individual contributor who might be, let's say we have a problem with a stakeholder and somebody who is not our direct report, who might actually have more influence or more power than we do as, let's say, senior designer. They might be, I don't know, a manager or maybe, let's say product manager. Maybe they're an IC, but they're a product manager. Generally speaking, on every team, product managers have a little bit more influence on a lot of teams, positive or negative, whatever. We're not going to argue about that. As an individual contributor who might be having some issues with somebody like that, how might you take that framework and apply it there? I guess obviously the steps are the same, but let's say they might push back a little bit or they might dismiss it. I'm curious how you might encourage your team to handle that if that scenario doesn't actually go the way they expected. This doesn't go the happy path and like, oh, thanks for the feedback, I'll change. What do you do then? How does that work?
A lot of things to unpack in this question. So first of all, it's scary. Absolutely. Like going to someone who's senior can have an impact on you as a result. Always scary. One of the things I encourage people, especially when they just learn this framework, is practice it with people that they feel safe with. You want to feel comfortable with the steps. So go to someone and just say, hey, can I practice? I want to give Jeremy, my jerk of a senior designer, some feedback. Can I practice with you before that? So I feel comfortable. Very important. This is something that people don't tend to do every day. And because it's a new thing, it's really important to practice it. It's not going to come out natural the first few times. The more you do it, the easier it gets. So first of all, that. Second thing, the whole purpose of this framework is to remove the personal aspect. I'm not coming to you and saying you are a jerk. I'm telling you, hey, in the presentation to the client, you cut me mid-sentence and did not let me finish the presentation. This is how it made me feel. And you can also start with, hey, I want to do a great job here. I have a lot to give to this team. I want to grow. I've learned a lot from you. When you do this, it makes me feel like you do not trust me. It makes me feel like I'm not meeting your expectations. So this is something that you can say, this is something you did. This is how it made me feel. Help me understand how I can get better.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because one of the things I love to do, and I think this helps, we talked about the importance of relationships. And I think this kind of thing helps to build relationships, but with other people that are not designers, that are not my direct reports or anything like that, but product managers, great example. When something goes really well and you have a
Mm-hmm.
great meeting with or they did something, or they, let's say, I don't know, let's say you're in a meeting with a product manager and they're presenting to executives, and maybe they have a deck and they're presenting the deck. They might say, I just want to give Guy a shout out. He did a fantastic job on these prototypes or mock-ups or whatever, like, great work, Guy, whatever. And then afterwards you're like, I just really want, you gave me a shout out. Thank you. I really appreciate the shout. Like giving that positive reinforcement for those, or reinforcing those positive behaviors. One, letting them know that you really appreciate it, that you appreciate them, that you view them as like a partner and things like that. It's a great opportunity to like re-stress, I really love our partnership. I think we work well together, blah, blah, blah. And using that same framework for the positive behavior that you want to have continue.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I love doing that, and I love that idea of reinforcing positive behavior. I think a lot of times we don't give positive feedback. I'm thinking across the decades that I've been working professionally, how often I've received positive feedback versus negative feedback or critical feedback to improve and things like that. And so, I think it's something we could do a lot more of, I don't know if you have any thoughts there, but yeah.
Yeah, I definitely should do more of that. I love doing it. And it's, what better way to, make someone's day? Actually, the book that I mentioned, what they say, when you sort of bring this framework to your team, for the first 3 weeks, only use it to give reinforcing feedback. Just do that. Get people used to the framework, and they're more open to it afterwards. You have that trust in the framework.
Yeah, because, here's the thing, and this is something I think is so important to stress. The reason why great relationships, I think, are so important is like ultimately we are building many times very complicated, sometimes complex systems with many moving parts, often big enterprise teams. Maybe there's hundreds or thousands of people all working together to produce these things that need to work together somehow. You're ultimately going to have hard conversations, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's a disagreement on how something should work, or in this case, feedback, critical feedback that you would like for them to change their behavior, something like that. You're going to have hard conversations. It's inevitable. There's no way around it. Those good relationships make those hard conversations just that much easier.
Mm-hmm.
What I love about this is what you mentioned, giving the positive feedback for however long before you give any negative feedback. Imagine trying to take that feedback we talked about, the PM, to a PM you're constantly butting heads with, who you have a terrible relationship with. How is that conversation going to go? It's probably not going to go very well. But if that's a PM that you have regular one-on-ones with, you meet all the
Mm-hmm.
time, you have small talk, you know about their family and their kids and things like maybe side projects they're into, or hobbies that they're into, things like that, you've got a great relationship. That feedback is going to be that much more impactful when you have that good relationship versus feedback to someone who's just going to dismiss you outright because you have no relationship with them, or worse, they don't appreciate you, or they don't really like you at all to begin
Yeah.
with. And so those relationships make those hard conversations so much easier.
I would actually say that having a good relationship with someone is actually not the most important thing here in a work environment. I think so. Giving that feedback, the feedback framework is awesome, but there's a certain condition that you have to meet before you can even start with it. And that is you need to know that you and the other person are walking in the same direction, that you're trying to reach the same goal. Because then you can say, like, hey, when you're doing this is how I feel, or this is how you make this person feels. And they may say, okay, I hear you, but that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And they say, oh, going in different directions. We're not trying to achieve the same goal here. You don't necessarily have to have a great personal relationship with a PM, but you both need to be going in the same direction. You need to have the same vision. You need to be trying to achieve the same outcome. And then you might be going in different ways towards it, but as long as you're going towards the same place, you can say, hey, we're all trying to do the same thing. Here's how what you're doing is preventing me from doing it. But if you don't agree in the first place that you're going in the same direction, you can't really get that alignment.
So begs a question, and how does one get there? What advice do you give your team to even know what that other person thinks or doesn't think, or compare your two visions of
Yeah.
the future or ideas, concepts, or whatever, of where you're headed? How do you get there? What do you do? Do you have any thoughts on how you can get that alignment?
Yeah, there's a lot of different techniques to do it. I mean, first of all, you need to, this is going to sound out there, but talking to the other person and just asking like straight out, what is your goal here? What are you trying to achieve? What are you understanding? One of the things I love to do when I meet new stakeholders in a project, the first question I ask them is, what is keeping you up at night? What are you worried about? What are you concerned that's going to happen? And then I see, oh, now I know what they're thinking of, and it has nothing to do with what I'm thinking. At least I can find that common ground or common language with them. I know that if something isn't working, I know what language to use. I know how to say, oh, you know what? You don't care about consistency in the design, but this thing that's happening, it's also making the timeline slip. I know is what is top of mind for you. So first of all, you need to figure out what they're interested in, what they're looking at. If you're doing it within a team, a great tool, for example, is a team charter, where everyone together craft this document that says, these are our values. This is why this team exists. This is the purpose of this team. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is our mission. And a really important thing that has to be in the charter is, if something bad happens, how do we fix it? How do we fix problems within the team? That's really important for everyone to agree on. So this is kind of like, if it doesn't exist, if there's no immediate shared goal, you create one that people agree to.
I love that idea of a shared charter. Well, one of the best teams I think I've ever worked on. I was on this team for about 4 years inside GE. This was hands down like one of the best teams I've ever worked on. My team right now, they're wonderful, they're amazing, but this is no doubt like the best team I ever worked on. We did this exact same thing. We actually took 3 days out of the week. We did a workshop where we figured these things out, and we said, what are our values? How do we want to work together? What do we value in our teammates? I got approval to get posters designed, and we designed some cool posters with our values and put them up in the office. Back when we went into an office, obviously. And I actually have them in my basement right now. I kind of hated to get rid of them, which is sort of sad, actually kind of pathetic. I still have these stupid things. I can't get rid of them. But anyway, put them up, and we made people know that this was what we believed. And when we did interviews and we hired new people, we presented this to them and said, what do you think about these? What's the most important one for you? We got their feedback on that. And we used that as a rubric for hiring, And so that was like something really important for us. And it's no surprise to me that was like one of the best teams I've worked on, because we were very high performing, but we were high performing because we worked really, really well together. And it wasn't because we were all the smartest people, the most talented or whatever. We just worked really well together, but we established those rules up front. And I love that you call that. We didn't call it a team charter, but it was a very similar exercise, and I really like that. The other thing I was thinking, you mentioned one-on-ones when you get a new stakeholder. When I join a new team, or when someone else joins the team, something I love to do, like set up a one-on-one, and I like to ask them, what are your expectations for me, especially when joining a new team, especially. What are your expectations for my role? Have you ever worked with people in this role before, and how did you work well together before? If it didn't work well, like what happened? How can we fix it and make sure this relationship is fruitful, or we work well together now? Things like that. Because I think a lot of times when we have conflict, especially at work, it's about expectations. It's about expectations. Like, I expected them to do a thing, they expected me to do a thing, but we never actually said it out loud. We didn't clarify it, and then we had a problem.
You hit the nail on the head. The two main problems I see struggle with at work. One is, like we said, like communicating with another person, or friction with another person. The other one is feeling overwhelmed and stressed because they don't know if they're doing a good job. And they don't know if they're doing a good job because it's not defined for them. Like, they don't know what is expected of them. And it's all about setting expectations. If I don't know what my manager expects from me or how I'll be measured, I'm going to try different things. I'm going to do my best my best guesses, but I'm never really sure. And the same thing with talking with another person. Like you said, like you never set that expectation of like, hey, when you do this, this is what I understand you mean, or I expect you to show up like this. We rarely do that. Only when things start to go wrong, then we start course correcting, ideally using that. Like one of the things I like to, you said earlier, we have a lot of empathy for our users. That's kind of like a thing we taught as designers. We're the owners of empathy. No one else can do empathy but us. I'm joking, of course. And we usually forget to have that same empathy for all the other people between us and the user. And as designers, we have so many tools in our toolkit to make things better. Like how, as designers, for example, we design something, we put it out there. How do we know if it's good or not? We test it. We look at analytics. There's, a lot of different mechanisms that we can put in place to know if we did a good job, if the thing we designed solved a problem for the user. We can use the same exact tools that we have, go and talk to another person, ask them, like, is this working for you? Is this not working for you? What would make this better? And we have all those tools. We just rarely think to use it in that way.
Yeah, I love that. This actually reminds me of, I used to do this back in this team, actually, the one I was just talking about. I was the UX lead. I had a team of 4 or 5 people under me, but we work with, it was 4 engineering pods in Europe and 3 in the United States. And I had some designers in Europe as well. And we did a survey once a quarter to gauge how we were working with the rest of the team. It was a very similar thing, and we could sort of track metrics over time. So we got feedback, we made an improvement, and then we kind of see, and then the next quarter, it was kind of a lagging indicator, obviously, but there's probably better ways to do this. But this is what we did, and it was beautiful. Like, we were able to improve how we worked, we changed our process, we, got feedback from engineers and improved how we presented things or how we worked with them, and, they loved that we were listening. They appreciated that we were changing, and, it built those better relationships, and they trusted us. And so, we had a lot of leverage coming in when, they saw something that they didn't like. We were able to kind of influence that because they trusted us and there was a mutual respect there. And it's interesting, like a lot of times, we'll just sort of guess, like, I don't know, how do your engineers think, you work? I don't know, like how often do we even have one-on-ones with any of the engineering team? Maybe we're on a stand-up with them or something, but I think most of us are probably very rarely on and having constant communication with any of the engineers that are actually in charge of developing and pushing the things that we've designed to production. And then we always wonder, like, why does it never look like we designed it? Why is that thing off? Why is that, that's not the right color. They didn't use the right variable. The font size is off, whatever. It's like, well, how often did we talk to them? It is the way that we delivered it easy for them to understand and digest? Was it different? Was it, because a lot of these times as engineers, they're going to go and they're going to do the fastest, easiest thing for them because they're under deadlines. They have to finish that thing within 2 weeks, right? The sprint or whatever, however long their sprint is. And so they're going to find the path of least resistance. And if you've made it hard for them, they're going to figure out how to get their work done one way or another. And that's generally why a lot of times it's not because they're just bad developers. I think it's because we haven't made their job easier, but we never asked. It's such a simple little thing. I love that you call that out, and we so often just fail to do it. So here's my question. As a manager, as someone who has a team of designers, what is something that you would want to see them do, how they work for the better? What do you find yourself wishing that they knew?
I think starting with what you just said, and not that they're not doing it, but again, it's easy to, like, because you're not being assessed how well you interact with other people, or how well do other people enjoy working with you, or enjoy the artifacts that you create. Do they work for them? I think just a lot more, and my team is actually doing a pretty good job with that because we're working on a design system. And we have a whole mix of people on this team, not just designers. We have engineers, we have accessibility specialists, we have researchers, content designers. And it becomes kind of like a micro company in a way, or a team that's cross-functional that way. I think we're a lot more attuned to the frustrations and the challenges others have. So it's easier for us to then go and ask our, the consumers of the design system, hey, is this working for you? What would make it better? What we make your life easier? It's, again, going back to for the user rather than that you interact with. But it's always a question of, I think the main question people should always think to themselves is, what are the assumptions I'm making here? And what am I not seeing? Which is a really hard question to answer, which is why you need other people. Because you can never answer that question for yourself. What am I not seeing? You have to ask other people, what am I missing?
It's really interesting. Like the thing that I think of immediately is, bias blind spot, where you assume everyone else has these biases and everyone else is, wrong. And for some reason, you just happen to not have these biases. Oh, I'm better than everybody else. But realize that we fall for these things too. And we make assumptions when we shouldn't. And we, have perceptions that are probably more than likely wrong many times. And, getting that feedback from somebody outside of that situation and being, an objective third party, I think is really important. Here's something I'm curious about as a manager. I imagine, a lot of things that we're talking about are stemming from conflict and things like that. And I think a lot of times we'll probably bubble up and try to, go up to our managers and, put up the chain of command, see if someone else can fix it for us. And I'm curious, as a manager, what kind of things do you wish your team would resolve for themselves without having to get you to fix it for them? Are there things that you're like constantly like, I don't want you to call it your team necessarily, but maybe in the past, hypothetically, things that you wish your team would stop bringing up to you because you would rather them handle it on their own?
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, it's not because they're doing anything wrong. They just don't have that muscle trained of resolving those issues. And it is really scary to go to for two reasons. One is, I'm sure you've received feedback. And I'm not going to say corrective feedback. I'm going to say negative because I'm sure someone told you something that hurt you in the past. Everyone had that. Like someone told you, I remember one of my managers telling me that I'm a terrible information architect. That was early on in my career as a designer. I have no idea why they said
Yeah,
that.
what does
I
that
have
mean?
no
Right.
idea
Yeah.
what they
Yeah.
based on it exactly or how they measured it. They said it. And that tells me, oh, I don't want to give feedback to another person because I don't want them to feel the way I did. So people just avoid giving feedback to other people. Hope that it goes away on its own. It never does. People are afraid to do this because, again, they don't have tools, remove the personal aspect from it. And which is why that framework is so good because it just focuses on the behavior. And because they don't have those tools, they don't see any other course of action. They're not going to go to that person because that's scary. They're going to come to someone who, they feel safer to go to, which is usually their manager. And hey, I don't know what to do. Help me fix it. It's work. It's work for the manager. The manager has to make sure that the team learns these tools and is comfortable using those tools.
Yeah. I love that. So I was going to ask you this, and I think I know the answer because it might be learn these tools or get this. But if you've got a team or people on your team that are struggling with, let's say, the cracks in those foundations we talked about in the intro, the one small step that they could take today to start improving how they work with their team, what would it be? Is it learning those frameworks? I imagine that might be what it is. But what do you think?
I would say the easiest thing is spend more time with those people. Let's say you're a designer and there's a developer that you don't necessarily get along. It doesn't have to be like full on like fighting. I wish my relationship with that developer would be better, which is a great thing to do because that is also going to make your work easier and better and quicker and all those things. Even if you're remote, hey, you have time to jump on a call? Here, this is what I'm thinking. Let me walk you through this. People fundamentally, this is where a lot of our problems come from. People want to feel heard. People want to know that they matter. And a lot of those negative emotions come from, oh, I interpreted what you said or did as disrespect, or you don't think I'm good enough. And then I'm punishing myself and I feel hurt. But if you give the other person that space to feel included, to feel that they matter, to feel heard, right? Like, hey, I'm thinking of designing it this way. What do you think? Does it make sense? You see any issues? You give them the room to work with it, not just like, hey, I'm going to throw it off over the fence to you and you go build it and talk to you never. When you include them in the process and you bring them along, they're more likely to come back to you. They're more likely to know, oh, this person trusts me. This person knows that I have something to contribute. It's so easy to start building relationships this way.
I love that. That is such incredible advice. It's like you're in my brain. You're in my brain, Guy. Get out of my brain. No, but I love that so much. And, there's so many benefits to this. You get the technical feedback early, so you don't waste time designing something that wasn't feasible in the first place. But then they get buy-in, which is incredible. Then you don't get the pushback later. And this is so many times I've seen designers just go off in a room or go off on their own. They design something for a month. Then they do the big reveal. And then you hear all that feedback. And then you're in a meeting with 10 other people or whatever. It's hard to go back and fix it. At that point, your deadline might already be coming up, so you don't have time to change it. So you've already just made it harder for yourself. You've made it harder for yourself. You made it harder for your team. You made it harder for everybody. But getting that buy-in early, you already know the questions people are going to ask. You already know the constraints. You already know all that stuff. There doesn't have to be a big reveal, because everybody was involved from the beginning and they all know about it anyway. Maybe there's a big reveal for that one executive stakeholder or whatever who wasn't involved, but at that point you've already built a bunch of allies who can come in and help answer critical questions in that meeting and show that you've come to this consensus together and you've done this together. You've incorporated the feedback, and it just builds trust and everything else. And, just like you said, and I think this is so important, it isn't when we say relationships, it's not about going and getting a beer after work or, talking about football games and things like that. That could be it for sure. But it's the idea that like the mutual respect, I think, is the most important thing, and the mutual vision and a shared understanding that we're all working together on the same team at the end of the day.
Exactly.
You can't beat a product manager. If the product manager loses, how could you possibly win? How could the company win if the product manager loses, So like, it's not an us versus them kind of thing. I think it's just understanding that we're all in this together. We're all generally working towards the same goal, or hopefully are. And if one of us loses, we all lose. And I think that's just so important. I love it. All right, Guy, this has been an incredible conversation. I love this so much. We've been talking for almost an hour now, but I could probably keep talking to you for the rest of the day about this. I've got 5 little questions I'd like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. But before we do that, any closing thoughts, anything that we didn't get a chance to talk about that you think is just really important, or any final parting bits of advice that you want to leave to everybody listening?
Yeah. So this people thing, the communication with other humans, it's the easiest and the hardest thing. And it is probably going to be the thing with the highest ROI, return on investment. Like, go and talk to another person you work with, sit with them, walk them through what you're doing, ask them what they're working on, what problems they're running into. Like, just spending half an hour with another person is going to make your work better, and it's going to make your relationship with that person much better.
Beautiful parting advice, Guy. Beautiful parting advice. All right. So like I said, I've got 5 questions I like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. First up, this is, by the way, the first thing that comes to your mind. You don't have to think too hard about these. We won't judge you too harshly. First thing that comes to your mind, what is your favorite non-design book?
Oh, my favorite fiction book ever is Fictions by Jorge Luis Borges. It's a collection of short stories that are extremely philosophical and meditative, and each one you can just spend years thinking about.
All right, that sounds good. I put it on my list. I love a good book like that, and that's like one you could come back to over and over
every
again.
year.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that stuff. It's one book to take with you on a desert island. It never gets old. All right, next up, what is your favorite non-design podcast?
I'm not going to plug my own.
I was surprised you didn't put it in your bio in the beginning, but we should definitely give. I was gonna link to it in the show notes, but you can. Well, how about give your own show plug, by the way, and then you can answer. I mean, maybe it is your favorite podcast, but make sure you give your own show plug, because I think it's an awesome show. I love it.
Yeah. So I started this podcast last year. The idea came when I saw on LinkedIn that almost every post was about how to become more efficient, how to become a 10x designer. And then one day I saw someone post a picture of the books that were, at the side of their bed. And they were all fiction books. And I thought, wow, what a breath of fresh air. I started this podcast where every episode is a conversation with someone in the design world, something they love to do, or a topic they enjoy that has nothing to do with design. And I want to show that you can be successful in design without being all about design 24/7. It's called Design Downtime, and I'm in the middle of season 3 now. So that's my own plug. I'm a huge fan of comedy and improv comedy podcasts. A big daddy of them all is Comedy Bang Bang that I listen to every
That's a
week.
good one. I love it. Yeah, Comedy Bang Bang is a good one. And I love Design Downtime, by the way. It's awesome. But you got like stuff like people talking about travel, and I think the most recent one was like sewing and, I don't know, all kinds of
Yeah,
baseball,
the one that came out. Yeah, punk rock.
punk rock.
It was amazing. The my guest Bill, he created a 14.5 hour playlist on Spotify for the podcast.
I love it. One of our former guests on here, Pavel Samsonov, was on there. He was talking about baking bread.
Yes,
So
exactly.
yeah, that was a really good one. But yeah, it's just really cool. I love like all this random hobbies that all these people that I know a lot of them from like places like LinkedIn and stuff. And they're all, a lot of times they're posting about design related stuff. And it's
Hmm.
just like great hearing about non-design related stuff. But anyway, I don't know. It's a good show. I love it. Check it out. Do you have a URL? Is it designdowntime.com?
Exactly. DesignDowntime.com.
designdowntime.com. Yeah, check it out. And we'll put it in the show notes and all that stuff as well. All right. Next up, what is your favorite meal? This could be something you cook, something your grandma used to cook, something at a restaurant, something you just eating on a side of a road somewhere.
Oh yeah.
Favorite meal.
My one food that I'm a snob about, shawarma.
So you said you were from Israel, right?
Yes, originally
So
from
you get
Israel.
pretty good Mediterranean food out
Oh,
there, I assume.
Mediterranean, Middle Eastern food is the best in the world.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's awesome. I've never been. I would love to go at some point, but there was a restaurant in New Orleans. I'm originally from New Orleans, and it's called Shaya. The chef was from Israel, and it was Israeli food. Like I've had hummus and stuff before, but
Hmm.
like I have never had food like that. I mean, like they made their own pitas and house. Oh my god, it was like amazing, dude. If the food is half as good as that place was down in New Orleans, oh my god, I can't imagine. Shawarma, do you make it yourself, or is there a restaurant you like, or where do you get
I
it?
do have a good recipe, a simple recipe for homemade shawarma.
I love it. That is my favorite. I just love that. Do you like barbecue it or roast it, or how do you do it?
Yeah, roasted.
Okay. Yeah, I do like with chicken thighs, and I have this like quick
Exactly.
like seasoning that I just got at this Middle Eastern store close to us, but I just do like sheep pan chicken basically and then chop it up, and oh my god, it's so
Hmm.
good. Anyway, you're making me hungry, dude. I just got back from lunch and I'm hungry again. All right. Next up, what is your favorite vacation spot?
It's a good question. So every year so I'm here in Canada, and every year we rent a cottage, which it was what you would call a lake cabin in the US, for a week, and we go there. It's just like, completely, not completely remote, but it's far enough from people. You don't get to see anyone. And, I like to every morning start the day with, getting in a kayak and just going around the lake, super quiet and just the best way to start the day.
Oh man, yeah, y'all have some like beautiful mountain valley scene. I don't know. I've
Hmm.
never been actually up to that part of Canada, but I imagine you guys are close. I've seen stuff on the movies, but it looks pretty in the movies I've seen. I assume it's
It is pretty.
that way. But yeah, Toronto's east side. I get like I'm thinking of like Vancouver area, which I guess is like West Coast, but
Yeah,
a
we
little
don't have
different. Yeah.
mountains like I have there, actually. Yeah, but we have a lot of lakes.
Beautiful. I love it. I went to Toronto once when I was a kid. For some reason, we went to Buffalo in December to visit my dad's friend, and we stayed with his family and stuff. And they took us to Toronto for like a day. And I remember just being so freaking cold, and it was like freaking miserable, and it was snowing, and like my dad had no idea how to drive in the snow because we're from New Orleans, and it never
Hmm.
snows down there. Anyway, that was a memorable trip, mostly because it was just such a mess with all the snow and stuff. But anyway, there was like a science museum or something in
Oh,
Toronto that I
there
don't know if that's
was.
like, is it still there? It's not there anymore.
That's a sore point now.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. Well, this was like 90s, so this was
Hmm.
like almost 30 years, at least 30 years ago now. So early 90s actually. So this was like yeah, 30 something years ago, who knows. But anyway, I remember being really cool when I was a kid. I don't know what it was like in real life. Like my memories of it though are pretty amazing, but all right, anyway. I'm going to take my kids up there. We're actually in Cincinnati now.
Oh, you're close
And
enough.
we're actually pretty
Yeah.
close. I mean, like we could drive there in like 10 hours, something like
Hmm.
that. What I want to do is like go up through Detroit and then pull into Canada from Detroit and then do a road trip through Canada
Hmm.
to Toronto. And I'd love to go like Quebec and stuff too at some point, but Montreal and all that. That's on my bucket list. We'll see. All right. Last question. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
This would sound, I mean, I'm a manager, so
Yeah,
it's
right.
par
Obviously
for
not
the
design,
course,
yeah. You're going to say Excel.
but it's going to be Excel. It is it is very versatile. That's probably it. Or just like, honestly, you know what? A whiteboard.
Oh, I love whiteboard. Yeah,
I'm one of those people that really loves to think through doodling and drawing stuff on a whiteboard. Whether at the end of it there's anything legible or not, doesn't matter, but it helps me get my thoughts out.
Yeah. We talked before about sitting down with an engineer and just thinking through stuff. One of my favorite things to do back when I was in an office 5 years ago now was to go in a conference room with a whiteboard and just bring an engineer and like talk through stuff on a whiteboard. That was like one of my favorite things to do. Just spend like an hour in the conference room doodling and just drawing stuff and having them kind of with their interpretation. That was like one of my favorite things. I miss that more than maybe anything else about working remote, but you could still do it in Miro or FigJam or something, but I don't know. It's just
not
the
the same.
physical marker,
Yep.
and I just like rubbing stuff, like erasing it with your arm, having like the stuff all over your arm. Anyway, that was good stuff. I love that. All right, Guy, that is it. That's all I've got. That's the last question. I really appreciate you coming on. Before we get out of here, give yourself a plug. Let everybody know where they can find you. We talked about Design Downtime, but everything else, LinkedIn, all that stuff. Where can they find you?
LinkedIn, pretty easy to find me. Design Downtime, the podcast, and Blue Sky. I'm
Sky.
pretty active there.
Right on. Yeah, it's funny. This is how we got connected, I guess, was on Blue Sky. I don't know. Like, when I first joined Blue Sky, I started to make a list for everybody listening. You know the story, but everyone listening. I made a list of like funny people or something like that. I added you, and then I stopped adding people to the list because I'm not big on social media, and I don't really spend a lot of time on social media. But anyway, I added you to the list, and I never went back and added anyone else. And then one day you messaged me, you're like, is there a reason why I'm the only person on your funny person list or something? I can't remember exactly how the conversation
I'm
went,
okay. That means I'm the funniest person in the world. That's fine.
Anyway, at some point I'll round out that list, but for now you're number one and the only person on that list. So anyway, check out Blue Sky. I like it a whole lot better than Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter, whatever it is now. I can't do X. But Blue Sky's fun. Hang out. It's fun. If you're on there, follow Guy and then give me a follow, and you'll never see any posts from me because I never post anything. But all right, Guy, well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeremy. It was awesome.